Greetings, heroes. It is I, your friendly neighborhood rabbi, John Carrier here. I see a lot of people in the chat. Boy, it's been a rough morning to get started. We're a couple minutes late here. Today's my kid's first day of not school. First day of not school. School's out for summer. It's my lounge Alice Cooper for you. So that's probably not what you're tuning in for. You're probably tuning in for today's video topic, which is the Parashat Hashavua. That's the Torah portion of the week. And this week's Torah portion is Behar. This is one of those fun years with lots of weeks in it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my videos on the lunisolar Hebrew calendar. But it means that sometimes when Parshiot are shmushed together, like Behar Behukotai, Gesundheit, you might not get to study a lot out of either one of them, or you'll have to pick a topic. But this year we get to read all of the Parshiot individually, and Behar is a great one, and something I actually kind of stumbled upon this year. This is why we read the Torah incomplete. We read the complete Torah every single year, is because you can always find something new. At least that's been my experience, is that every single year when I go through the Parashat Hashavua cycle, the weekly Torah reading cycle, invariably I find something new in each Parsha that I haven't seen before, even though I've been reading it for years and years and years. And this year was no different, but this year was a special surprise because I stumbled across this passage that helped me understand one of the things that I didn't understand about my very favorite passage of Talmud. And my very favorite passage of Talmud, I know not everybody has a favorite passage of Talmud. I understand. Not yet. Maybe we'll change that. God willing, someday you have a favorite passage of Talmud. Mine is Bava Metzia 58b to, let's say, about 60a, 60b, wherever Tenor Shalachnai stops. But this is my all-time favorite passage of Talmud. It means a lot to me personally, just because it's helped me in my work as a rabbi. It's helped me work out a few things in my own life and helped me grow to be, a better person, or at least better than I was before. And so this is a passage of Talmud that talks about the ethics of speech. And I just, one of the beginning parts of it, I'd always kind of glossed over just to get to the good stuff, or what I thought was the good stuff. And I never realized that the thing that I was kind of glossing over because I didn't quite understand it yet. Sometimes there are things that are easy to understand and less easy to understand. And the part that was less easy for me to understand or relate to, I discovered was an integral part of this week's Torah portion. So before I get too deep into it, I want to give some shout outs to people who are here, or maybe let's do an intro to the podcast. Why don't we? Just in case, God willing, we get this uploaded before Shabbat. So let me think about this. Hero, have you ever heard the expression, sticks and stones may Hero, live studio recording. That's what we do. Hero, have you ever heard the expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me? I have to break it to you. They totally can. And the Jewish tradition has recognized this for a long time, that words can be used to create worlds, and words can be used to destroy relationships. Words are powerful. And in today's episode, where we discuss the Parashat Hashavua, the Torah portion of the week, Behar, it connects us to a discussion in the Talmud about just how powerful words can be and how much we are responsible to use them with care. And we'll learn about this right after this bass. All right, clearing out some of the cobwebs this morning. Somebody Kathy called me the cowboy rabbi. It makes me smile. Boy, howdy! There might be another cowboy rabbi out there. This week we had the ordination of my good friend Jonathan Hudson, who's probably a bit more. He's even more cowboy than I am. He's taller and he's fresh out of rabbinical school. But I had the pleasure of attending his ordination. He did an incredible job. He was the ordination speaker, and he worked a boy howdy into his speech, even though he doesn't walk around with that accent as much anymore after hanging out at seminary here on the West Coast for a few years. All right, take a silence print. Thank you, Ron Snow, for that pleasant introduction. Thank you, Joey Weissenberg and the Hadar Ensemble, for those inspiring opening beats. I want to give a special thanks to all my friends who are in the live studio audience today. And most of all, thank you, Hero, for listening to the Jew Curious Show. I want to give some... Let's see who is joining us today for this Parashat Hashavua discussion. I see Ruthie is here from SoCal and Kathy from SoCal as well. Karen is here from Philadelphia. Nice to see you, Karen. And we'll see some more friends joining us in just a bit. Today's topic is the Parashat Hashavua, the Torah portion of the week, and this week's Torah portion is Behar. And in Behar, we see a lot of discussion about, well, macroeconomics. It's talking about the agricultural cycle of the year. It's talking about sort of the cycles of human economy. There, in this parsha, we learn about the Shmita Year, or the sabbatical year for land. Right? People get a sabbatical. People get Shabbat one day out of every 7 days, and God tells us we should give the land that we are farming a Shabbat. I'm not a farmer, but I read about farms. We should give the land a Shabbat 1 year out of every 7 years, so that the land gets to lie fallow, it gets to renew its nutrients and whatnot, so that it will sustain us for longer into the future. It also talks about the Yeovil, the Jubilee year, and this is a cycle of 50 years. So we have seven. So we start off with a 7-year cycle for resting the land, and after 7 of those cycles, 49 years, the 50th year is called the Jubilee year, or Yeovil in Hebrew. And in the Jubilee year, we don't just give the land a rest, we give the land a reset, and we give people a rest and a reset. It says that excuse me. It says that if any of the previous 49 years, let's say somebody had a bad year and they had to sell some of their tribe's land to somebody in another tribe in order to sustain themselves, in order to buy seed, in order to buy food, then in the Jubilee year, that land was to be restored to its original tribe. Furthermore, if somebody sold all... excuse me, I just woke up here. It says... Furthermore, it says if somebody has sold all of their land and that wasn't enough and somebody had to sell themselves as an indentured servant, then in the Jubilee year, everybody who had done so would be set free and allowed to return back to their household. This was like a reset button on the largely laissez-faire economy of our people in ancient times. This allows for the libertarians out there, this clearly allows for free enterprise. People can have good years and have bad years. It's not an entirely communitarian system whereby everybody gets sort of the same portion, everybody has the same luck, as it were. No, it allows people to have good years and bad years, and it allows people to accumulate wealth even as other people are losing it. However, However, the wisdom in the Torah is that this is a good way to encourage people to find new ways of farming, to set things aside, to weather the economic storms. But left unchecked, that could lead to a permanent underclass and a permanent overclass. That could lead to a tribe that would hold all of the wealth and tribes that would have none of the wealth and couldn't find a way back out. And so every year we would reset the economy with the Yeovil, and that's largely what this Parsha concerns itself with. It also gets into, let's say, if somebody is an indentured servant before the Yeovil, they're still enduring this, what are the ethics of indentured servitude? What's the responsibility of the person holding that debt? And the responsibility is to treat this person, even though they're bound to you, as a brother, as a sister, as an equal. They're not to have worse quarters than you have. They're not to have worse food than you have. And once they're let go, once they're released from their debt, you're supposed to provide for them so that they can get back on their feet. This reminds me a lot of the sacrifices where when we started this Judaism thing, when we got the Torah, when we were instructed on how to do sacrifices, how to connect to God, God instituted sacrifices. And Maimonides asks why. We don't need sacrifices. God doesn't need to eat. But the wisdom in this is that if you try to change an entire people too quickly, the people might not accept the change. When talking about the sacrifices mentioned in Leviticus and elsewhere, Maimonides asserts that God started this project not needing sacrifices, but knowing that we needed to do them. This is how we observe people in Egypt and elsewhere connecting to their gods. And if we had been instructed to do something so radically different from what people were used to and chuck that aside altogether, it never would have taken. It never would have sunk in, and the people probably would have abandoned the project and gone back to the ways of their neighbors and other peoples in the area. So what God did was God said, I'm going to ask you to do sacrifices, not for me, but more for you, because I know you need this stable way to connect. But we're going to change things, right? We're going to say not everybody can do a sacrifice, just the priests. And not everybody can do it anywhere they feel like, but we're going to do it in one place, the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, the tabernacle or the temple. Preserving the institution that people were comfortable with, and yet limiting it so that we would gradually be able to let go of it. And when we lost the first temple, and this was reaffirmed when we lost the second temple, we came up with a new way of doing Judaism that we could live without killing an animal in a particular place in order to connect to God. Likewise, in this week's Parsha, when it's talking about the institution of indentured servitude, sometimes discusses it as slavery. This was an institution, this was a feature of the economy that far pre-existed Matan Torah, that existed before the relationship between Bnei Yisrael and God. And this was a fact of life. Some people were slaves. Some people were temporary slaves or indentured servants. In fact, in David Graeber's book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, he talks about the fact that when we read the history of slavery, a lot of times we project on it the kind of, let's say, kidnapping-based slavery that happened in the African and American slave trade. Or we think of the slaves as discussed in the Iliad of slaves of war. When one people would conquer another, they would take some of those people into slavery. Again, that's more like kidnapping, if you will. In his book, Graeber says that most of the, let's say, bound servitude that existed throughout history wasn't kidnapping slavery, it was debt slavery, right? It was people who sold themselves, or let's be real, family members, into bondage to someone else in order to acquire money or pay off a debt. And that is what Behar is teaching us about. It's saying, okay, this is a thing in the world, but we're going to elevate it. We're going to make it better. Excuse me. And and among our people, we know that we're not going to be able to get rid of this altogether. The economy would collapse. Nobody would know what to do. Nobody would know how to get work done or how to borrow money if they needed to. So this thing is going to stay around for a while. But in Behar, God instructs us ways to change it such that eventually we could let go of it, right? The ethic of how you treat somebody who is bound to you requires that you treat them as an equal. And when we read about slaves and servants and things like that in ancient times and even today, that's not the situation. Somebody who is bound to another person is never treated the equal of that person, not as of equal status in the household. They don't have access to equal quarters, to equal food, and things like that. But no, Behar is insisting, if somebody is working for you in this way, you have to treat them like you would treat any member of your family. And the rabbis in the Talmud suggest that this was designed to be so onerous that no one would want to own a slave, that no one would want to indenture somebody for labor because it was expensive. Right? You might as well have an employee or somebody who you don't have to put a roof over their head. So again, this was taking something that we already had that was going to be really hard to get rid of right away, or it wouldn't take. People would just reject the covenant altogether, but changing it in certain ingenious ways so that eventually we would give up on it ourselves. We would wean off this institution that lended itself toward oppression. And so that, I think, is principally what Behar is trying to teach us in the kind of shot, in the surface level of meaning. But if you want to dig a little bit deeper, when it's talking about sort of the land changing hands at the time of the Jubilee, it talks about how you shouldn't be dishonest in your business dealings. It says, when you are buying land or selling land, do not oppress your brother, or do not wrong your brother, do not cheat your brother. It's this word tonu, which is kind of complicated to translate. It could mean harm someone or oppress someone, extort someone. It's got sort of a wide semantic field. And so the Talmud tries to spell it out for us. Like, don't harm somebody in buying and selling, meaning don't cheat somebody in business. And this is the basis of business ethics in Judaism. Fair weights and measures, right? Fair, don't give somebody a wooden shekel. Don't put your thumb on the scale when you're weighing things out, right? In your business dealings, when you're trading land or produce or whatever, you shouldn't oppress someone by being dishonest, right? When you're dishonest with someone, you're stealing from them, you're harming from them, you're oppressing their, let's say, net worth, as it were, their ability to sustain their lives and their family. And it says, don't oppress people in buying and selling, price the land fairly, and then it repeats it. Then the Torah repeats itself, apparently. It says, do not oppress your compatriot, but fear God, for I am the Lord your God. And so the rabbis take a look at this and says, the Torah is repeating itself here, and it doesn't do that for nothing. It says, don't oppress your brother in buying and selling. And a couple of verses later, and this is Leviticus 25:14-17, if you're following the program at home. In Leviticus 25:17, it says again, don't oppress your compatriot, but fear God, for I am the Lord your God. And just to teach a couple of principles about Torah hermeneutics, according to the rabbis, how do we interpret text? One of the rules of how the rabbis, the sages of our tradition, read and read the Torah is that the Torah does not waste words. It doesn't repeat itself just to be redundant or repetitive or what have you. Sorry, I was just a little bit redundant there just now. I got some frog in the pipes right now. So, given that the Torah doesn't waste words, if you see something repeated, then you can deduce that it is teaching two different things. And in the Talmud, in Masechet Bava Metzia, on page 58b, I believe, it distinguishes between these two phrases. It distinguishes between verse 14 and verse 17. And it says in verse 14, when it says don't oppress, it means commercially. It means don't oppress in buying and selling. In verse 17, it means don't oppress with words. And this isn't clear when you're reading Behar that this is what it's talking about, but the rabbi said, okay, no, this is pretty clear to us. One is about oppressing people in business matters. One is about oppressing people with speech. And then it goes on for a couple of pages in the Talmud talking about what it means to oppress people with your words and how serious that is. And before I launch into too many examples, I just want to give a shout out to some friends in the chat. Again, so glad Ruthie and Kathy and Karen could join us today. Seeing some more people come in. Miriam, nice to see you. Miriam from New Hampshire is here. Our friend Michael Pacheco is here. And Grysicle says, Shalom. And Kaufen und Verkaufen darum. That sounds how I feel this morning. Kaufen and Verkaufen darum. I'm not a German scholar here. I'm good for ordering off a menu. That's about it. And Karen is very generously sharing a link from Bava Metzia 58b, it looks like. So everybody can follow along in the Talmud with me. Trig is here. Welcome, Trig. Nice to see you. Red leather, yellow leather, unique New York. It's not early in the morning. It's just early for me. So, all right, here we go. So some examples of what the Talmud means by oppressing people with your words. And if you want a shorter version of this, it's in the Mishnah. I want to say Bava Metzia chapter 4, Mishnah 10. It gets into this, but then it elaborates in the Talmud in Bava Metzia 58b and so on. And it says an example of oppressing someone with your words. The first thing it says, and this is kind of a digression in Bava Metzia. Bava Metzia is mostly about commercial law. It's about proper conduct in the marketplace. It's about how to do business fairly and squarely, and what the consequences are if you cheat people. And then it takes this digression, just as in Behar, it's mostly talking about agroeconomics. It's talking about debt. It's talking about labor. It reads like a macroeconomics textbook, only with the voice of God in there. But then it takes this digression into the ethics of speech. Likewise, Bava Metzia, running along, ethics of the marketplace, and then it takes this digression into the ethics of speech. But first, it sort of connects the two. It says one way to hurt someone with your words, it says don't ask the price of something if you don't intend to buy it. And I don't know if anybody is as guilty of this as I am. Sometimes people are just price shopping, comparison shopping, window shopping, as it were. And you go into a store, you go into Best Buy. I think my favorite example of this, and again, I confess to this, I try to do it less and less since I studied this part of the Talmud. But let's say you want to buy a camera. A really fancy-dancy new camera. Maybe you're going to make a web video series or live stream or something like that. Not to project on you, But let's say you're going to go buy a fancy dancy new camera and you think, I'm going to get the best price online, probably. I'm going to get it off of eBay. I'm going to get it off of Amazon. But I really want to hold it in my hands. I want to see what it feels like. I want to see, how easy the buttons are to understand. And I can't do that off a picture on the internet. So I'm going to go into Best Buy or some other electronics store, Fry's, we have here in Southern California. Get no money from the Fry's people, by the way. You go into Fry's and you pick up the camera that you're interested in buying and you take a look through it, and somebody comes along, somebody who's at the store, who works there. At Fry's, it's probably a shirt and tie. At Best Buy, it's somebody in a blue polo shirt, and they come along and they say, "Can I help you? Can I? That's a great camera. Can I explain the features to you?" And you say, yes, how much is this? And what are the different features and all this? And that person walks you through how to use the camera and whether it might be suitable for your needs. And then you say, thank you. And you walk away and you pull out your phone, your smartphone, and say, okay, how much is this on Amazon? How much is this on eBay? And you see you can get a better deal and you walk away. Meanwhile, that guy is back in the aisle holding the camera, but not just holding the camera, but thinking about the commission that he or she might have lost, right? When they see you playing with the camera, asking how much it is, they may build up in their mind, like, all right, I'm going to make a sale today. And this is important because my boss told me if I don't sell a camera today, I might be fired or I might be put on some kind of probation, right? Think all the more so, back when the Talmud was having this discussion, there was no Best Buy, there was no Walmart, there were none of these big box stores. Everything was pretty much a mom and pop affair. And it was probably in your village and where everybody knew each other, right? And you walk into this store and you say, how much is that doggy in the window? And the person who's talking to you has in their mind is like, all right, I'm going to make rent based on this sale. I'm going to be able to feed my family. And he says, the one with the waggly tail? And you say, yeah, how much is it? And he says, oh, it's 5 shekels or whatever. And he's like, and then you walk out the door, right? Because somebody is giving away puppies just like that for free. Then that person is hurt. That person got their hopes up and you dashed them, right? And so maybe you might say they're sort of responsible for their own feelings, but in a way, it's about misleading them as to your intentions. That's why whenever I go into a store now, and especially if I'm looking for things that I might want to purchase there if the price is right, or I might want to purchase online if the price is wrong, Bob, I make it very clear, like I'm here to comparison shop. I'm not necessarily going to buy something today, and I'd like to be upfront about that, especially if I'm in a place where I think people are working on commission or things like that. So that's one way is of hurting someone with your words that is misleading them. It's not just, there's different kinds of, let's say, cheating people in business. Again, there's using false weights and measures, using, wooden nickels, overselling the value of something. But then this is about how we mislead people with words. You can harm somebody, not just their pocketbook, but their feelings by how you speak. It also, in this passage, illuminates another way to hurt somebody with your words. And it says, if you have a Baal Tshuva, if you have somebody who's clearly on the path of reforming their lives, don't remind them of their former deeds. It says this in the Mishnah, it repeats it in the Gemara. If somebody is a Baal Tshuva, don't remind them of what they used to do. For example, if somebody is just finishing a sentence of incarceration for stealing cars, and they've really tried to turn their lives around, they've really tried to get back on the straight and narrow, they have reformed themselves and re-enter the community, the worst thing you could do is go up to that person and say, hey, remember back when we used to steal cars together? If somebody is on a clear path of change, it's cruel to remind them of how they were before the change. If somebody else wants to talk about that, if they want to talk about themselves that way, that's fine. Some people feel feel grateful to share their story and feel grateful that they've changed and want to share that. But you're not supposed to go around remembering. You're not supposed to go around reminding people of how they used to be before they made a change that they wanted to make. That is oppressive. That is sometimes humiliating. Don't remind me of back when I used to have a clear voice. I don't know if anybody here knew me when I had a clear voice. The essence of this sugya in the Talmud, this pericope, the word sugya means pericope. What does pericope mean? It means sugya. The essence of this passage, this discrete passage of the Talmud, is that we are not allowed to humiliate other people in public. If you mislead someone as to the prospects of their business, that is humiliating. If you remind someone of their former ways before they got on the right path, that is humiliating. If you call somebody by a bad nickname, if you make fun of them in front of their friends, that can be humiliating, and we are not supposed to do that. In fact, further down in the sugya, it says that embarrassing somebody in public is like the sin of spilling blood. And that's no joke. That's serious. That's one of the first no-nos in the Torah with Cain and Abel. You know, whosoever sheds the blood of his brother, by his brother shall... whosoever spills the blood of a person, by a person his blood shall be spilt. Right? Spilling blood is a serious matter. And here in the Talmud, it's saying that hurting someone with your words is just like spilling blood. And where do they get this? Well, one rabbi says, when you embarrass somebody, you cause them to blush, and then after they blush, they blanch. This is sort of the facial cycle of embarrassment, if you will. When you are embarrassed, your face turns red as an immediate reaction. And then as it sinks in, how people are, maybe their perception is changing about you in the room, your face goes white. And so one rabbi said, yes, clearly, this is spilling blood. We see somebody turn red, and then they turn white. The blood goes into their face, and then the blood goes out of their face, and this is like spilling their blood. There's a discussion later that says we've talked in this channel before about, let's say, Jewish purgatory, if you will. You know, we don't have like a permanent hell for the most part, but we do have a kind of purgatory called Gehenna or Gehinom in the Talmud, where, you know, if a soul has some, let's say, unresolved issues upon the person's departure, then there's this Gehinom business where somebody might go for, let's say, a max of 12 months. That's what the Talmud says. Nobody's in Gehinom for longer than 12 months before going on to Olam Haba. However, in this passage, one rabbi says, look, there are certain kinds of people who go down to Gehinom and never get out. And this is perhaps, rather than, you know, making your plans for the afterlife, this is perhaps a metaphor. This is this one rabbi's statement that here are the worst things that a person can do. Right? This is the kind of thing that purgatory doesn't fix. And there were three things that he said. One was interfering with a person's committed relationship. It's a eshet ish. It's simply put, adultery, but really the essence of that is breaking up somebody else's relationship, breaking up somebody else's marriage. That's one. The second is embarrassing somebody in public. And the third is calling somebody by a bad nickname, or spreading a bad name about someone. And you might wonder, like, what about murder? What about, what about horrendous crimes? What about, there's a lot of stuff that says don't do. There's like a top 10 list of the 10 commandments. And one of those is adultery. One of those is messing with somebody else's relationship. That's in the top 10. But the other two are about humiliation. And the rabbis ask, like, what? Why is embarrassing somebody in public and spreading a bad name about somebody different? Aren't these the same thing? Aren't these both a kind of public humiliation? Why list two of those things? Why not just why list three of those things? Why not just list two? And the rabbi says, no. Humiliating somebody in public and spreading somebody and calling somebody an embarrassing nickname is separate, because sometimes people get so used to that humiliation that it no longer embarrasses them. And so that's why we call this out separately. Even if somebody is not embarrassed by that name, you still shouldn't do it. You still shouldn't perpetuate that humiliation, even though it's been going on for so long they've become numb to it, right? If it doesn't seem to harm them in the moment, it still harms you for doing it, right? It's still a thing that impairs the quality of your soul, the quality of your life, the quality of your character. And so of all the things in the world that people could do, the top three worst things, two of them are about humiliating someone. And so that's how seriously the rabbis of the Talmud took preserving the dignity of the people around you. And I said before that this was kind of a digression. This was kind of a digression in Bava Metzia. This was it's mostly talking about commercial law. Then some rabbis got a bone to pick about somebody who embarrassed him this one time. So we'll talk about that for a second. Then we'll go back to commercial law. But it's totally unrelated. That's the feeling that one might have on the surface of it. That's the feeling that I had on the surface of it. It's like, okay, I think this is important, but it's not really what we're talking about. But what I learned from Behar this time is that kind of, let's say, economic justice, economic restoration, land, property, debt, slavery, labor issues, it's not just about economics. It's about the dignity of human beings. It's about the dignity of the individual. And while this may not be apparent on the surface in Parashat Behar, again, our Torah-itic macroeconomics lesson, this connection to the Talmud, this connection to the idea of humiliating people with your words is akin to humiliating people in business, teaches us that if you mistreat someone economically, that can also have consequences on their dignity. It's not just about buying and selling. It's not just about who wins and who loses. It's not just about who works for whom and under what circumstances. Even in our business dealings, even in things that seem to be kind of divorced from honor and shame, we need to treat each other ethically. We need to not embarrass one another. So I'll say the rabbis took very seriously, in itself, embarrassing somebody in public is one of the worst things you could do to somebody. One of the worst sins that they could imagine. But even in how we treat each other in, let's say, more transactional situations, can have an impact on someone's sense of self-worth and how other people perceive them. So when you're in the marketplace, when you are, you have the power to buy or sell or manage another person, hire someone for their labor, don't divorce that transaction from your responsibility to treat everyone honorably and to insist that other people treat you honorably. And I think that's what the Torah portion this week is telling us. In addition to the ethics of speech being important in its own right, but also the human dignity involved in the marketplace. The Yeovil isn't just about restoring economic stability. It's about restoring human dignity, right? No tribe will be permanently left behind. No person will be permanently left behind. We have to consider that every person is created in the image of God and deserves to be treated with dignity as such. And we can impair that by how we speak. We can impair that by how we trade in the marketplace. And I believe the Torah is giving us a way out of that cycle of impairment and embarrassment and teaching us how to do everything with dignity and preserving the dignity of our fellow human beings. Thank you for learning with me about this. I want to jump into the chat to see what's going on. We got a lot of people talking to each other, and let's see if there are any questions here as well. I love it. If you're ever looking for the passages of scripture or Talmud or whatever that I'm talking about, Karen is very generously sharing links to Sepharia. Sepharia.org is a great site for looking up Jewish texts, whether it's the Tanakh, whether the Torah or the Nevi'im or the Ketuvim, whether it is the Mishnah, whether it's the Talmud, the Jewish law codes. It's got cross references to Rashi and all sorts of other commentators. So many Jewish books, more being uploaded all the time into Sepharia.org. Again, I get no money from the Sepharia people, but I use this free resource all the time. So I feel like it's incumbent upon me to give them a shout out. And Karen is here today giving us links back to the sources in Sepharia. I see Val has joined us. Welcome, Val. Idit has joined us from New York City. Says Shabbat Shalom to everybody in this wonderful community. Couldn't agree with you more. So we're gonna. Sorry, I have such a frog this morning. Got to get up a little bit earlier before these live streams. Apologize for that, gang. Nevertheless, I'm glad we could learn together. So we're going to wrap up this edition of the Jew Curious Show. Once again, I want to thank everybody who has joined us in the live studio session. And most of all, I want to thank you, Hero, for listening to the Jew Curious Show podcast. If you would like to stay connected to Jew Curious people just like you, the best thing you can do is join the Jew Curious Community Center. That is a private Facebook group that we keep lovingly tended, carefully guarded, and troll-free for you to meet people just like you, to share your story, to share your struggles, and to share support with other people who are on your path. And to do that, all you have to do is go to jewcurious.show/JCC, as in Jew Curious Community Center, and we will get you hooked up. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that this show is made possible by the Jew Curious School. The Jew Curious School is a private online portal of Jewish learning for Jew curious people wherever you're coming from. If you're Jewish, if you're not Jewish yet, if you're never Jewish, right, but you're just looking for the Jewish roots of your own faith, let's say, you are welcome in the Jew Curious School. It's not for everybody, but it might just be for you. So I suggest you go to jewcurious.school/info to see if it might be right for you, and you can try it out risk-free. And once you're there, you can access our weekly live small group discussion of the Torah portion of the week. You can take an Intro to Judaism class or dive into one of our, I'll say, more intermediate mini courses that we have. We usually have every month we usually have a new 4-course series pop up. But my favorite thing about the Jew Curious School is the community that we have built together, the forum where people share ideas, where people share their story, share support for one another, and, some jokes, recipes, book recommendations, and the like. But that is what I am proudest of in this community, is the community. But that is what I'm proudest of, is the community But that's what I'm proudest of, is the community that we have built together around this learning. And if you're interested in that, check out jewcurious.school/info. It has been my great pleasure to learn this week's Torah portion with you. And until next time, hero, peace. All right, everybody. We made Minyan today, and really happy, grateful that you're here. Some great ideas here. And let's see. We've got. I can't tell if this is German or Yiddish. Some people are speaking Yiddish in here today. Kathy's sharing that there's a great Temple Beth Tikva has a good live stream. If anybody's in the Pasadena area this Shabbat, I'll be leading services at Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center here in Pasadena tonight at 7:30 and tomorrow morning at 9:30. We'll be an intimate group in the small chapel there. So come check that out. Love to learn with you. I've seen some Jew curious folks show up there before. Always happy to hang with people. All right, everybody. We're going to close off the learning for today. Thanks for joining me. Next, stay tuned. I think today I'm going to be putting out the schedule on my YouTube channel of what we're going to be learning next week. I want to get back in the daily mode. Just to kibitz, just to share. This week was kind of a big week for me. My son got married. My oldest son got married last week, and it was the first wedding of any of my children, and it was kind of a mind-blowing event, and took me a little bit to recover from it. It was out of town, so we had to travel, we had to get back, had to kind of get back into the groove of teaching. So just had a couple of lessons this week, but next week I really want to get back in the daily groove. It'll either be at 9 a.m. Or 1 p.m. We'll see. So check that out. Subscribe to this channel, so you can see, when I put the schedule out, you'll be able to see that right away. But just go to youtube.com/Rabbi John Carrier, and you'll see what's happening and what we'll be talking about when. And I tell you what, I haven't made a canned video in a while. It's probably made about 30 live sessions since I made my last edited, uploaded video, because I'm enjoying learning with people so much. It's really nice to be able to connect with people live, answer questions about the topic, so that I actually answer the questions that people have, not just throw out there what I think people might be curious about. So this has been a lot of fun for me. I'm not gonna lie to you, and it's been fun because of you. It's been fun because you have shown up, and because you have shown up for each other. And that's something also I didn't anticipate, is how people would bond, how people would be kind. And had to chase off a couple of trolls together a couple of times, but that's what community is about as well. So thank you all for being here, and I'm gonna sign up for Shabbat. We got one of my kids' birthday party is later this afternoon, and I've got to feed them breakfast because it's their first day off of school for the summer. And with that, I'm just going to say thanks once again. Shabbat shalom, everybody, and peace.